Okay, class. Now let's get into how we actually conduct job analysis. In this class, we're going to focus on four methods in particular for job analysis. These are not comprehensive. There are other job analysis methods beyond these four, but these will be the focus of our attention in this class. Now, how do we gain? Let's get the mouse here. How do we gain all this information on the job? Data, people, things, job activities, people with whom they interact, equipment and software that they need to be proficient with, work context, decision-making authority, sensory and physical demands, other details. How do we gain these things, class? One simple way is through interviews, asking people who actually have that job. Such interviews are multi-purpose and can be used for more than just staffing purposes. You can interview one employee at a time or multiple employees in a focus group discussion. Yeah, and in these interviews, trained analysts ask questions like these. Yeah. Describe your job in terms of what you do. Asking about data. How do you do your job? Do you use special tools, equipment, or other sources of aid? Things, yeah? How long does it take to do each job task? Then you can also ask more specifically about KSAOs, about job knowledge, yeah? What subject matter areas are covered by each task? What facts or principles must you have an acquaintance with to do well? Skills, what activities must you perform with ease and precision? So on and so forth. So here you actually get to ask employees what are the things that you want to select for in a job without saying so explicitly. Yeah. So again, they're being interviewed about their duties and responsibilities, the KSAOs, equipment and conditions of employment. Typically, you would conduct this job analysis interview with incumbents, people who currently have the job. You can also interview people who formerly held the job. However, you can also have other informants like supervisors who evaluate job performance often. And you can also have clients. If, for example, a nursing job is being done with patients as beneficiaries, you could also get information from patients. Yeah. Such interviews are typically structured, class. So you don't just rock up and ask any number of questions that come to mind about what goes on the job. Typically, there is a structure that has a certain sequence that covers key areas and is the same for everyone interviewed. Yeah. Of course, you can ask different probing questions to different interviewees, but the general structure should hold. Now, the goal of the job analysis interview is to generate task statements. These task statements describe what the worker does, yeah, using verbs, to whom it or to what it is done, what is produced in the process of doing the job, and what equipment, tools, procedures are needed. Yeah, here's what a task statement would look like for a Centerlink officer. Asks questions, listens, records answers to of applicant on eligibility form in order to determine eligibility for benefit payment using eligibility criteria from the manual and from structured interview techniques. So this gives us lots of information. Yeah, this task statement tells us about the data, about the things they're doing, with whom they interact, the applicant, the purpose to determine eligibility, and the things they have to work with, which is the manual and the job knowledge of what the criteria are from the manual, and so on. Now, interviews have a couple of advantages. First is that if they can be tailored specifically to the job without too much difficulty. They can also be tailored to the employee, and they can be easily administered to different stakeholders and informants like incumbents, supervisors, and clients. Yeah. The downside to interviews, class, is that they lack standardization. So yeah, it's not the same for everyone, and so there is opportunity for bias to creep in if the interviewee is not well trained. And so, as we see here, the skills of the interviewee is critical, but also the interviewer ability. Interviewer training is very important. It is also hard to do this with a large number of people. So if you have a job that is relatively variable and you may want to interview, say, 10, 15 nurses, that's going to be time consuming. It's going to be labor intensive, interviewing all these people, recording all of the interviews, what is it, transcribing, that's the word I'm looking for, transcribing all the interviews and then going through and coming up with task statements. So this is a bit more subjective, but they can be overcome, class. Then we have survey questionnaires. Now with survey questionnaires, we basically give employees a survey like the position assessment questionnaire that has a list of structured questions. I believe the PAQ has 189 questions that the employee is asked and gets a large number of responses. So here you can ask, say, all 250 nurses in the hospital about their jobs and get a lot of information relatively quickly. So these use task inventories that are developed by job analysts, like the position assessment questionnaire. Typically, this has 3 questions. It gets biographical details of the employee, a list of tasks with rating scales for each, which I will get to in a bit, and the conditions under which the work is performed. So let's get to an example first. So here we have some data from a task inventory for an accounting job. Yeah. So use basic arithmetic to add, subtract, divide, and multiply monetary figures and decimals. So on a 7-point scale from 1 to 7, where 7 is very important, of major importance, we have ratings here that the employees believe that this task has an importance of 6.74, very, very high. The standard deviation, which is how much spread is there in this, is very low. That means that most people agree that this task is very important, and there's little disagreement amongst the people giving the rating. And among the people rating the task, 99.2 percent of employees performed this task. So they say that this is something that we do. Then here we have a more peripheral task. Recommend to customers investment account options for investing savings. Note, class, the mean importance for this is closer to 1 out of 7. There's a big spread, so people don't really agree on how important this task is, and only 9% of employees report performing this task. So not exactly a critical thing to be selecting for. Yeah? So that's what an inventory might look like. Now imagine being the employee answering this task inventory with 189 statements, and then you see what goes into collecting this data. So typically with task inventories, we want to distribute the data to as large a sample as possible, so lots of employees. The goal is to identify the core important tasks based on the importance rating provided by the employees and the percent of employees performing the task and the general agreement among the employees. Now, class, task inventories have a couple of advantages. First is that once you have developed them, it's fairly efficient. You hand them out, often online, and collect them back. Typically, employees will fill in the inventory online as well, so you get all the data in like a spreadsheet straight away to work with easily. A large inventory can cover more than one job. So unlike developing different interviews for different jobs, here you have one inventory to cover them all. It will highlight the core job components and the stuff that's a bit more moderate and the stuff that's a bit more peripheral. Yeah, and it has the advantage of anonymity for people who want to reveal things about the job without compromise, without putting their identities at risk. There are disadvantages. First is that developing inventories like this can be pretty costly, and if you want to buy them, they're pretty expensive. For example, the position assessment questionnaire charges $40 per employee, US dollars, 40 US dollars per employee who answers the task inventory. If the task inventory is badly designed, it can have a major gap that can miss a critical component of the job. It's also not very flexible, so it's difficult to adjust to the needs and demands of specific jobs. And it assumes that the incumbents are literate and proficient in well, English typically, yeah, which is not necessarily the case. So has its place in the job analysis pantheon, but certainly does have its disadvantages too. Next, we get the critical incidents class. Critical incidents are a fancy word for stories. So stories about good and bad work behaviors. So this is where employees or other informants are asked to recall or observe stories of good work and stories of bad work, and to write these down. So here's what critical incidents can look like. Let me move myself out of the way. Here's a good critical incident for a sales job. Employee Joe made a follow-up call to customer Mr. Leon a week after the sale. Joe wanted to make sure that Mr. Leon was completely satisfied with the equipment that he purchased from the store. Before ending his follow-up call with Mr. Leon, Joe gave the customer his contact information for any future issues that may arise with the purchased equipment. Good work. Yeah, it shows you what goes into doing the job well. Because again, that's the point. We want to select people who do the job well. Yeah, so job analysis should reveal that information. And of course, conversely, we want to know what goes into doing the job poorly. So here we have Mary did not use safety goggles while using the lathe in the machine shop. She stated that she has worked in various machine shops for the past 15 years and believes, excuse me, that she has too much experience and knowledge to get hurt. And to be fair, as she worked on her project, she still did not have on her safety goggles. She worked very carefully, however, at a slower than average pace. So this is suboptimal, generally bad critical incident where really not following safety guidelines in depth leads to generally lower quality work as well as risk. Yeah. So the goal is to create things like that for the job at hand, and use that to work out the job analysis. So one thing about the critical incidents class is that these are about behaviors, not traits. So here you want to let me restate. What we want here is not to say that Mary is sloppy or Mary is careless. We don't want to use adjective descriptions of Mary. We want to say what Mary did. She did not use safety goggles. She worked very carefully but at a slower pace. Yeah, it's behavioral. In addition to being behavioral class, it should capture the important aspects of the job, so the stuff that is most important, as well as being context insensitive. So it should be stuff that is not like a niche or rare thing, but it's something that is generally important across contexts. Yeah. So the first step class is to collect the critical incidents. Yeah. Then generate the list of events where employees did well or poorly based on the critical incidents, and then group these events into job dimensions, yeah, which helps identify the KSAOs that we're selecting for. So again, we have events. The critical incident specifically talks about an event, a thing that happened, an incident, so to speak. The incident descriptions are collected from subject matter experts, including customers. They're sorted, categorized, and then given back to the subject matter experts to work out which are most critical, which are most important. The advantage of the critical incident technique is that it is behavior-based rather than trait-based. So it really gets into what employees do that is good and bad at work, and captures the most important elements of the job, but that's most important elements in the view of the subject matter expert or the employee, which might not be most important to, say, the patient or the client, for example. Uh, Other disadvantages are that it is pretty labor intensive. You can ask subject matter experts to write down or to jot down the critical incidents, or you can collect this information through interviews. Yeah, so it can get pretty labor intensive too, and it might not capture the full scope of the job because these are the incidents that stand out in memory rather than like the small subtle things that uh, could be problematic but are relatively mundane and don't really stand out and aren't memorable. Now, lastly, we have subject matter expert panels in which we basically combine all of the three previous techniques. Oh, and I forgot to say, with the questionnaires, let's go back a couple slides. With the here we go. The task inventories, like the position assessment questionnaire, often the people selling these questionnaires recommend that you use an interview as well to kind of supplement the information. So typically they will administer the task inventory first, get some information about the task from employees, and then interview selected employees after to kind of get more context. Yeah, so that can also be resource intensive in its own way. And then lastly, class, we have subject matter experts, which are groups or panels of a couple of job incumbents come together for like a day to produce a job analysis. They are given the questionnaire, they're interviewed, they come up with critical incidents, and together work out what goes into the job analysis. So these are the subject matter expert panels. Now, there are other ways to collect job analysis data that are less structured and can help depending on the context. Yeah, first is observation. So actually watching the person do the job. This can be helpful for jobs where there's a lot of like very overt activity, maybe less helpful for things like creative work or work that's done, say, over a long span of time. Yeah. Then we have work samples. So work samples are like portfolios that you get from employees who have done the job before and kind of work out from the portfolio. Oh, this is what went into doing the job. Then we have work diaries where employees write down what they're doing every 15 minutes. Can be helpful. Can address the whole retrospective recall issue where people are not remembering key bits of information, but it is fairly obtrusive and fairly intrusive and can disrupt the actual job function. You could also do job analysis by performing the job yourself and then learning as you do the job what goes into it. Yeah, and then of course there's good old ONET. You go to ONET, get some information on the job, which tends to be very general and tends to be America centric, but can be a good starting point. And so yeah, there you go, class. That is how we conduct job analysis to gain information about a job. And once we've done that, that'll inform the rest of the selection process. So over the following weeks, we're going to go through what goes into selection. Yeah, starting with HR measurement. And that's all from me today, class. Take it easy.